Hi everyone, welcome to episode 3 of Sew Not Scary, a show where I help you overcome your fear of sewing so you can make quick, easy and awesome crafts for yourselves and your loved ones. In this episode, we will be taking a look at the top thread of a mini sewing machine. By the end of this video, you will feel confident about putting the top thread in a mini sewing machine, or rather, threading a mini sewing machine. So without further ado, let's get started. Now, in any sewing machine, you've got something called a top thread. Now it might sound a little bit technical when you say it that way, but actually it's very simple. It's just a spool of thread that sits on top of the sewing machine, so you can actually see it physically and it's not hidden away somewhere inside the sewing machine. So since we're talking about mini sewing machines, there is a thread that sits on this sewing machine as well, and let me show you where it sits. Typically it sits right there. Okay, and this is a hidden spindle where it's supposed to sit. So I'm just going to adjust the camera so you can see it better. This little spindle can hide away, so I can pull it up, and on this is where the top thread sits. But on the mini sewing machine there is another place where the top thread can sit, and let me show you that now. It's on this here external bobbin spool. What do you need to thread a sewing machine? You need a spool of thread, just like this one. And I've got good quality Gutermann black thread, okay? And of course you will need a pair of scissors so you can snip the thread. But for this sewing machine, simply because it's so small, it's always a good idea to have something called a needle threader at hand. Now you don't really need it, but it kind of helps you pull the thread through small holes and gaps easily without having to squint your eyes too much. So this is purely optional. You don't really need it, but I will show you how to use it while threading this mini sewing machine. Okay, now in this mini sewing machine, your top thread must pass through these 7 different points. And it's important to take a note of all of these 7 different points so that your machine operates perfectly. So number 1 is this little spring right there. I wonder if you can see it clearly, but if I turn the machine sideways, you will see that a coil of wire makes a loop or a hole through which your thread needs to go. So that's number 1. Number 2, it needs to pass through this thread tension controller. It's basically 2 plates of metal. Okay, it's not scary at all if you see it that way. Okay, it's just 2 discs, 1 and 2, and your thread needs to pass through this crevice right there. And when you tighten it, the thread gets tighter. When you unscrew this, the thread gets looser. We'll talk about that later, but for now just remember this is point number 2. So that's 1 and 2. Then we've got point number 3, which is another little coil of wire through which your thread needs to go. There. Now do you see that little coil of wire? So that's point number 3 where your thread needs to go. Okay, moving on, we're making progress. Point number 4 is this thing. Now this lever is what makes the thread go up and down as the needle of the sewing machine goes up and down. So let me show you. If I turn the hand wheel, you will see it go. So it's going down, okay, and then it's going back up again, and this is where your thread is going to pass through. Okay, so you've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's see, number 5 is this another coil of thread. Can you see it? I hope you can. Let me just try turning the machine this way. Okay, now you can see it. So this is where your thread is going to pass through next. Okay, so you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, which is up there, 5. Okay, the next 6th place where your thread needs to go through is this little hole right there. Okay, and it actually sits right above the needle. Okay, and can you see there's a little hole through this metal plate where the thread goes? That's number 6. And finally, number 7 is the actual needle's eye itself. So if I turn the machine sideways now, you will be able to see the needle, which is this sharp needle right there, and at the bottom of this needle is a tiny little hole, and that's the 7th point through which your thread needs to go. Okay, so those are the 7 points that you need to be careful of when you are threading your mini sewing machine. And now let's see how we're actually going to do it. So again, I've got my spool of thread in my hand, and we need to figure out which way it's going to sit on a sewing machine. Now with a Gutterman thread, it's very easy because you can just read the letters. The letters need to be upright. Okay, so when I turn the spool this way, you can see it's making the letter P, and we talked about this in an earlier video. I think it was in episode 1 where I talk about the P is for perfect concept. The thread's going up that way and round that way, making a perfect letter P. So your spool of thread needs to sit perfectly with a P. Okay, so that's the shape we're going to follow when we put it down on top of the spindle. Here we go, we're going to put it on top. Okay, now we're going to pass it through all of those 7 points one by one. Okay, here we go. Number 1 through the first loop. Okay, that's number 1. Number 2 through these tension plates. Okay, so it has to go between those 2 plates. Okay, you're not just randomly putting it anywhere behind it. The thread is passing between these 2 plates inside that plate sandwich. Okay, that's number 2. Okay, and immediately you'll feel that the thread is coming under some tension. Okay, now number 3 is this little coil right there. Okay, I hope you can see it. After number 3, it's point number 4. Okay, so I'm just trying to make sure that you get all of this. So 1, 2, 3, 4 through this little hole right there on top. Then number 5 through this coil right there. Okay. Okay, can you see it going through? Number 6 was that hole sitting right on top of the needle right there. Okay. Number 6, there we go, it's gone through. And our last point is the actual eye of the needle itself. So I'm just going to turn the hand wheel towards myself, always towards myself, never away. Okay, don't want to damage the machine in any way. The needle's eye is up now, I can see it clearly. So now I'm going to thread it through, and this is where I get to use my needle threader. So it's basically just a bit of flexible wire. Can you see it's so fine and so flexible that it can actually pass through a needle's eye like so. Let me show you. There, it's through the eye of the needle. Okay, and now I can put my thread very easily through the loop inside this wire. Okay, and now I can pull the wire out there, and my needle is now threaded. Okay, so I'll just pull this thread over to the other side. So this is how you thread a mini sewing machine. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up. It will really help me create more helpful content for you. Please also click the subscribe button and the bell icon so you can quickly develop your sewing skills easily. I'm also putting up fresh craft content on my blog unicrafts.com, so do check it out. Thank you for watching. Happy crafting. Bye.